So this article is what you're basically saying is that they are developing these capabilities, but they are doing it the wrong way because it's coming from without. Actually, you would say that we all have the capacity to become invisible from within. Does that make sense?
Yes, completely. When you start to, what I always advocate is that the self, the observer and the observed, or the looker and the looked is one. You see, then you start to say that this is the way you reclaim the ability to consciously create in your surroundings. And so when you say that the looker and the looked is connected, then you would actually say that whatever we are seeing outside of us is a symbol of self.
Right.
And then you would say that what we're projecting out there now with this technology is actually ourselves. We're trying to create.
We're not aware that is ourselves.
We're not aware, but if we were to take it all back in a very real way, the practice of retaking the projections is that whatever you see in someone else, you mindfully experience it as a part of you. So then you take it all back, and then you realize that it's all a projection of yourself. It's like God. What we project is in terms of God being something out there. Is a projection. That is something inside of us. When we look at the astrology and we look at the stars, and we tend to look at these stellar constellations as objective and independent of us, we're doing the same thing. What we see in the stars are patterns that are inside of us. But the same way we separated mind from body, the Western culture was actually a separation of the looker and the looked, to the point where the looker started to experience itself completely separate from self, which is the surrounding, and calling the surrounding matter and the interior mind. But now, what we're doing now by healing this wound between the self and the surrounding is that you say, no, these are projections, and we got to take that back. These are my properties, these are my capabilities. And yes, when the human being starts to connect to its unconscious and to the self, and thus change the template that the self is in, and the self is the atom, then we change also the template of the space that we're in and of the body and the stuff the body is made up of. And when we go out of space and time, we're basically becoming invisible to people that are in a denser level of space and time. And so then we, as it were, we go stealth. So yes, all of this stuff is us, ourselves, all of this technology, but in an unconscious way.
Right, because it's projected.
Yes, we can fly and we can walk on water, and we have quantum communication, which is much more, which is telepathy, which is much more advanced than the internet or Wi-Fi, telephones, Wi-Fi, and all of that. So all of this is like a character, like a very low level of what really lies within.
Right.
And we are like at the point of becoming aware of this. When you look at the surrounding, and everything in the surrounding as a sense, a symbol of self, and as self does, then you reach back to the experience where that everything is you and that you are creating the physical surrounding. You see, when I go out of space and time, I change space and time, and what constellates around someone that is connected to the self with a capital S is a space and time at a higher octave, where there's no duality between space and time, or those where time and space don't exist. But so we change space and time when we change. You see, it's all it's all been projected outwards.
Okay, but this also happens not only on the higher levels, it also happens on the lower levels. Because we saw this movie, and these people, it was about exorcism, and they would like have the same capacity of what we would call miracles. They would teleport just like, but from one side to the room, climb walls, things like that. But it's all mimicking the same thing, but it's what you, I think, are referring to is this is happening also at the lower levels, and I think this is like a great source of confusion, because how maybe you're not operating at the right level, and you mistake it for being operating on a higher level while you're actually working at lower levels.
Absolutely, because so yes, there's two ways of going beyond classical space and time. There's the upward level, which is when you connect the opposites. See, a lot of physicists, quantum physicists, that are realizing that matter is actually mind. They would call it mind-like, but it's actually mind. It, they're trying to like become a bit of a psychologist because they once you if you're dealing with mind, then you need and you're not a psychologist, as it were. You know what I'm saying? Then you're lost because it's not physical anymore. And a lot of them are trying to understand, thus, trying to formulate like the way then the mind creates creates reality, but they don't really get it. You see, Jung, we need to really understand Jung because Jung understood the structure of the mind. And to understand the way matter is, if matter is mind like, then you need to understand the structure of the mind. If not, you just be saying, yeah, okay, emotions create physical things. But people would go like, yeah, so what do I do? How do I change it and whatever? But see, with Jung, what we found, Jung actually has provided the mind map for this because what Jung found is that the mind is actually made out of intervals or proportions between the conscious and the unconscious, pairs of opposites. The whole of classical science operates in terms of individual variables, but not pairs of variables. But yes, but what happens? What we know now is that when this pair is very close together, when there's low resistance between the pair, this is exactly what we would call space-time. So space-time is within us. Space-time is within us. And when this conscious and the unconscious connect, then space and time changes, and then we go out of space, classical space-time, and then we enter this realm of miracles and the magic. But when these opposites are extremely far apart, which is repression,
Yeah.
also we exit the classical space-time.
Yeah.
But what you could call that to a kind of a lower dimension. And this dimension also has stuff,
Powers.
dynamics that goes beyond our classical space-time. So you need to be able to distinguish between the two. And yes, there's a whole lot of.
Yeah, I think like the most innocent example could be that you're looking for your keys, and you put them on a certain place, and you have looked at in that place 20 times, and you didn't see it. And then when you find them, they were at the same place that you put them. And somehow those 20 times before you haven't seen them, and then suddenly they appear. But those like glitches are like signs also, signs of what, that you're repressed, or
Yes, exactly. This.
you're not really.
No, and that would be a beautiful example of how the physical world will be behaving very much in terms of the unconscious. You see, and yes, if you were to study real reality, we would see this. But what happens is that physics studies reality in highly contrived and controlled situations in laboratories where they actually are very much creating what they believe. But real reality would be full of these glitches, if you wish, full of what you would call then synchronicities, or actually evidence that the surrounding is the unconscious, and thus the field we're in is the self. It's just that the Western mind has understood of the self as being the ego,
Yeah.
but the ego is just the surface of that whole self, which you could see as three layers of an onion, and then we're just operating at this upper layer. And Jung found that towards the deeper layers, which you find in dreams, but also in disease and in synchronicities, that these deeper layers of the self are our surrounding. You see, so in a very real sense, uh, when you find sayings as do unto others as you want done unto yourself, or love thy neighbor as thyself, and stuff like that, was referring to uh, this expanded model of the self, where the self doesn't end at the end at me here, but it's the surrounding. And when you start to look at the surrounding, when you start to study what is happening around you, you will see that it's always at the first level compensatory, which is exactly the way the dreams operate. And at the deeper levels, you will get the more paranormal, the more deep, I want to call it deep synchronicity, and then you'll get like the collective unconscious, which is literally the timeline, which is literally time and events in your life of a collective nature. So we are literally creating this physical surrounding, and the more we can see that, the more we can, the word is not take control, but the more we can align with what our self is creating. And the self is deep, is something much more profound and autonomous than the ego. So a whole lot of what you are experiencing in your life as befalling you, you're against it, but this is what you are creating at the deeper levels, like physical symptoms, even accidents, falls, uh, things that you really want to happen don't happen. All of this is your creation. And if and Jung's model of the self gives us a way to understand this. And so then this is when you get like in Taoism, the saying how you have to go with the flow or align with what's happening around you and stuff like that, which is basically the implicit theory of understanding there is that the whole surrounding is self. You see, and this is what then you get to the spiritual traditions that say that there's we are one with everything. Um, and via Jung, we return to that. See, so Jung is like a timeline of the West, because Jung is also West, but that's the part of the Western culture that, as it were, became aware of itself. And then the other strand would be then this technological machine approach that increasingly is going into that understanding, that belief that the observer is independent of the observed.